most exciting evenings in my life, I would say, yes. The Rolling Stones are, in fact, here performing for a very small, select audience at the El Mocambo at College in Spadina. And this is the first time they've done anything like this in about 13 years when they came out of the club circuit back in England. Tonight, over 300 people are participants in a live album, which is being recorded tonight. This is a treat for the people here, and certainly for myself, one of the most closely guarded secrets in probably in the history of recorded music.
I know it's only around the road I like her. I know it's only around the road I like her. Yes, I do, but I like her.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Woods, here today at the famed El Mocambo. Welcome one and all, in the venue and from across Canada and around the globe, to the You Discover Music Canada live streaming event, The Rolling Stones Revisited. We have an incredible panel discussion coming up in a moment with people that were actually at the legendary 1977 shows and those that actually put it together. Oh, the stories you're about to hear. Now, first, a couple days ago, I was able to sit down and chat with the lead singer from the band who played all that week in March of 1977 under the neon palms of the El Mocambo. Miles Goodwin, the lead singer, founding member of April Wine, who were slated as the headlining act with what turned out to be a very big surprise opener. Miles Goodwin of April Wine recalls what he remembers from these legendary shows. We sincerely hope you enjoy. Hello, Miles.
I'm here trying to find you. There you are.
How are you? How are you, man?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're in Nova Scotia.
I am in Nova Scotia. I'm from Nova Scotia. April Wine started in Nova Scotia, and I'm back home.
How does it feel to be home? How long have you been there?
Yeah, but I've been back about 7 years, I guess. I mean, I love it here. I mean, what's not to like? It's the Maritimes. There's ocean everywhere, friendly people, seafood.
I love it there too. I spent
Yeah.
a couple of years there, Q104 back in the 80s. It's a wonderful place, isn't it?
It is. It's fantastic.
So 45 years ago in March, it was 1977, Miles. It's a pleasure to have you in the room. If you're not aware, this is playing at the El Mocambo. Have you been in the club since it was redone?
I don't think I have. No, I haven't. Absolutely not. I haven't been there since 77.
Incredible. Well, I can tell you this much: the sound in here and everything about the place, I think would impress you as it's impressed me. It's a beautiful sounding and looking room.
Yeah.
So you haven't been there since 77. And the reason you were there, you were the band, not the other band. They were the surprise band, but you guys were booked for a whole week. Tell me what you remember about getting that gig and booking that gig and having tape rolling to make a record.
Yeah, well, I was involved with the show coming together, but the details are basically that the Rolling Stones had an incident in Montreal in 1972, where some maniac put a bomb under one of their trucks. They were going to be doing a show at the Montreal Forum, and so a lot of equipment was destroyed. I think one truck that was blown up, I believe, had about 50 or so speakers in there, and that was all. They were all destroyed. And through the help of Donald K. Donald and his organization, Donald being the promoter, everybody I'm sure in the business is aware of Donald, he and some of the staff were able to help bring in some speakers, replacement speakers from Los Angeles. And so the Stones were able to do that show, and their manager at the time, or the person in charge of their tour and so was a Peter Rudge at the time, and Peter remembered that. So years later, when they decided to, 5 years later or so, they decided to do this recording in smaller venues, they remembered April Wine and invited us along. So.
And someone who knows all of these names you speak of would be someone in the room right now at the Almo, which is David Bluestein, the promoter.
Mm-hmm.
He was there, and musicologist, as it turns out, Rob Bowman was there. And the guy that was responsible for the radio contest, Duff Roman from CHUM Radio, was there and is here. And he speaks of how the contest was to send people to see you guys.
Yeah.
But they wanted to figure out a way to make sure they had Stones fans. No, I mean, we're all Stones fans, but they wanted to make sure they had diehard Stones fans in the room too. Do you remember how that contest went?
Well, I mean, I do a little bit. It seems to me that the idea was at first just to have a contest to give tickets away. But at some point, they let people know that the Stones were going to be there. And as I recall, and they were giving tickets, so many tickets to contest winners to be in the venue with the Rolling Stones when they performed there. That's how I think it went down.
The question they asked to give away tickets to see April Wine with another band, maybe, but they didn't say it was the Stones, was what would you do to party with the Rolling Stones? So people wrote in, letters, and then they won tickets. It was only after the first night when news got out, oh my God, the Rolling Stones were here with April Wine. So by the second day, everyone knew about it, and it was impossible to get in.
Well,
right?
you're telling me, your memory's better now. You're reading it, so you know what you're talking about. But
I had to refer to my notes because Duff Roman shared with me how it worked.
Yeah, because I remember the whole thing as it was explained to me. Like, we're going to be like a smoke screen. We're going to be. They know that we can sell the venue out, so it's an April 1 show. But then, hey, look, be a surprise for everybody the first night. Well, I don't know if it was a complete surprise the first night. I thought it kind of leaked out, but I mean, I could be wrong. But
it would be hard not to leak out. All it takes is a phone call. Hey,
yeah. So I think people knew both nights the Stones were going to be there, but it was a good secret for while it lasted, right up until close to showtime. Yeah. So it was.
If someone says to you, 1977, you guys played the Alamo and the Stones were there, what's the first thing that comes to your mind about feelings you had then, or something that happened then?
The only thing, the first thing that comes to mind is Jagger being as friendly as he was during soundcheck. I always remember that because he was on the stage and the rest of the band, the Stones, weren't there. But he was there, and he was jumping up and down on the stage. It's a small stage and a low ceiling. So he was jumping up and down with his hands in the air to make sure during the show he didn't hit the ceiling, because it was close enough when he starts leaping. I remember that. And then he came down and he has this very winning smile. It's like this big.
It's true.
He's all teeth and it looks like it's a beautiful smile. And so introduced Mick here, yeah, hi, well, I'm Miles from the band. Nice to meet you. And he was very friendly. And that always is the first thing that I think of. Of course, because of Richards being busted for heroin, there was a somber mood over everything. And it wasn't like a party central, kind of loose and fun and free. And they kept to themselves. I mean, I only saw Richards and Wyman at the time, and Ron Wood. I'd only see them in passing. And it was just literally in passing. There was no stopping and carrying on or talking and kibitzing. It was just business. Keith looked like he could possibly spend a great deal of time in prison. So yeah, but they pulled it off. They played well. They got some live material for their album. So
it's incredible that it took this long for them to release it all. As you probably recall, they put a few songs on Love You Live, the Stones record, and they were good. Little Red Rooster always stands out for me. But having just listened to the entire album as it's coming out, it is really good. You're right.
Well, they're a great band.
Of course they are.
They are a great band, and their their roots are in the blues. And they had a blues album come out, was it 3 years ago or 4 years ago?
God,
and
yeah,
I was
time flies.
amazed because I've released a couple of blues records in the last 3 or 4 years. One of them, my first one, Miles Goodwin and Friends of the Blues, was nominated for Juno for Blues Album of the Year. That was like 3 years ago, maybe 4. And my second one, also, Miles Goodwin and Friends of the Blues 2, did very well, both of them internationally and award winning. So it was very, very gratifying to do that. So when the Stones came out with the blues record, I was very keen to hear what that was like. And it's a great album. I forget what it's called.
It is.
But it's a great album. And Mick can play harmonica, man. He's good. Yeah.
Keith has always said his favorite harmonica player is Mick. Mick is solid.
He's solid. And I had no idea, because you do hear the harmonica in some Stones songs, but not a lot, not like this. The blues was it was a remarkable album, and
Seems to,
and it was sounded like it was recorded off the floor. It has that raw sound, which was what they wanted.
we older guys tend to record like a band. What a concept. Joe Walsh always talks about the difference in his mind. The biggest difference between how things were done and how things are often done now is that guys get together in a room and play. Sure, you do some overdubs, but can you replace that spirit? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to have a beating heart. And
yeah, of course, of course it does, and that's the way to record. You're right. There are overdubs, but when you get into the basic tracks, it has to be there, and it can't be one of those I'll fix it in the mix things. Like you can never fix that in the mix. It feels wonderful, or just don't. So you got to do it right.
You did it right by having Eddie Kramer on hand, as I recall. Tell me about recording the tracks that you guys recorded when you played with the Stones at the El Mocambo and made a record of it.
Well, the thing with the recording and all of that, I mean, there's not much to say about that, because really it was all about the Stones, Eddie recording the Stones. So while he's literally rolling tape, may as well, do April Wine. We worked out a deal for some kind of amount of money. My management did. I don't know about that. You know what it reminds me of when I think back, playing with the Stones, and it includes the recording of it, was basically stay out of the way. It's kind of like, don't get in the way of anything, because this is big. This is the biggest thing, in Canada, anywhere right at the moment. It was like that with the Stones. So I can't say very much about the mixing of it, because, he was off in his truck.
Sure.
So you never really see him or hear him, but he was there and did a great job. But what I do remember is post, and that was going to New York and working with Eddie at Jimi Hendrix's studio, Electric Lady Studios, if I have it right.
You do.
And I always get the name of the studio mixed up. Electric Lady.
No, it's that Lady, Electric Lady.
Yeah. So what was really funny about that, and I read, this is my memoir. It's called Just Between You and Me.
Oh, I have to get it.
And it's a thick book, and it covers all about the Rolling Stones and the El Mocambo. And it was a Toronto Globe and Mail bestseller. I don't know if you know that, but it was. So
well, I can't wait to read. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. And so, and it was written with Martin Melhuish too. He did a lot of research.
Of course.
And together we collaborated on the book. It was a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
But anyway, it was post the recording. When I went to New York, down to the studio there to meet with him, one of the funny stories I can tell you about that quickly is that when I was checking in, there were a group of 4 long hairs that had just finished checking in, and they went off to one side, and I went up, and I said, they said, yes, can I help you? I said, yes, I'm Miles Goodwin with April Wine, and I hear one of the guys behind me say, and I must have said the band April Wine, and one of the guys says, what kind of name is that for a band, April Wine, And I heard that, and I'm like, oh. So I said to the lady, and they kind of wandered off, and I said to the lady, I said, who were they? She goes, oh, it's a new band called Kiss. And so they didn't care for the name, or they thought it was a funny name, April Wine. But working there with Eddie was the nicest thing, because I love New York, and I've worked a lot in New York. And I was down there doing that with Eddie. And of course, I'm a big fan of Eddie's work with Jimmy, obviously.
Yeah.
And he's done so much more. He's such a gentleman. I love Eddie. And we're still friends. And when I had my book signing, who was there? Eddie.
Eddie Kramer.
He was there. And what a surprise that was. So I couldn't miss it, mate.
Right. Yeah.
So, what a gentleman. Class act. So anyway, working there with him was very, very cool. And I enjoyed that experience a lot.
I have to ask, do you recall seeing Maggie Trudeau at the
I did see Maggie Trudeau. In my book, I kind of joke about it a little bit, but I was introduced to her. She had a lot of security, and it really was high. And I really like your band, April Wine. I love your music, and thank you. Good next. It was really wasn't meeting royalty, but it was kind of cool. It was kind of cool to say hi.
She was a beautiful woman. And
Yes,
yeah,
she was, and probably is still a beautiful woman. Yeah.
Miles, thanks a million. Last time I saw you, you were playing a Ride for Sight gig. You were playing an outdoor gig with April Wine. It was amazing.
Oh, cool. Right. I don't remember. There's so many of them, but
I
everyone's
know.
back on the road. I leave tomorrow. I'm going out to play some shows tomorrow, and like I'm excited to see the boys and see fans and just make a loud noise.
I'll make a point of coming to see you, and thanks. Good health and great gigs, and thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Stay
Okay,
safe.
be well. Okay, man. Bye. Anyone knows.
Over 300.
There you go. More than anyone I know. He's taught musicology at York. What a you wouldn't not show up to that class, right? I bet attendance was through the roof. He's been nominated for many Grammys. He's won for his work on the Complete Stax Soul singles. I met him when he was cranking, right? Congratulations, Ron. That was a bunch of years ago.
Sorry?
The Stax collection that you won a Grammy for. It's a long time ago. One of the 300 liner notes you wrote.
4 years ago, managed to lose that.
Oh my gosh. I met you when I don't know if you remember this, you were cranking records on Dundas in a little hole-in-the-wall record store that you ran and owned, as I understand it. And I loved the store so much, and I'd go every Saturday, make my trip into the city, and spend $100, and you got a big bag of records for $100 in those days.
I remember that.
It was called Vortex. Yeah. And I opened my own store thanks to you, so thanks for the inspiration. Mr. Rob Bowman, everyone. To his right, to my left, started in the biz as a light man for high school plays. He went on to doing the Catharsis Light Show at the Rock Pile. Maybe you've been to the Rock Pile, a.k.a. the Masonic Temple. He saw Led Zeppelin there 3 times. That's pretty incredible. Then he went on to work the famed Festival Express. If you haven't seen that movie, you need to. And that led to meeting and working with Michael Cole. That's a name that you would associate with the Rolling Stones. On the way to both men being involved with the Stones, David would go on to start up the agency where they booked bands and clubs, including this very one, the El Mocambo. He booked every band from 1976 to Christmas 1984. Then did more business with Michael Cole before David started his own merch company, effectively going from, I love this, you'll love this too, from the king of the booking to the king of cotton.
That's me.
He does T-shirts like nobody's business. He's also an advocate for therapy dogs. This card says, "Hi, my name is Dexter. I'm a St. John Ambulance therapy dog."
That's right, over 400 visits.
Outstanding, right? My surrogate daughter, Lauren, is a dog freak just like you, David. So, Mr. David Bluestein, everyone.
Thank you.
Right. And the far left of the couch, an esteemed radio person on the panel, which is wonderful for me. Thank you for being here, Duff.
And the best dressed.
And the best dressed, clearly. And he shone his shoes, which is more than we can say for the rest of us. He was named by the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences the winner of the Walt Greeley Special Achievement Award at the Junos of 2019 for his contributions to the Canadian music industry. Not only would Mr. Roman, Mr. Duff Roman, head up Roman Records, putting out music by the Hawks and the Poppers and David Clayton Thomas, as well as becoming chairman of the Canadian Association of Broadcasters, I think his coolest and most relevant connection to this event is the fact that he became a programmer at CHUM in 1974. There's not a more legendary radio station in this country than CHUM, if you ask me. And he and they were instrumental in the event we're all here to celebrate today at the El Mocambo. Please give a nice warm welcome, Mr. Duff Roman. Now, I'll probably ask one question, and then I'll just sit back. I may have to come and herd these cats, because these cats know some stuff about music and the Rolling Stones, because they were here at the gig. I can't continue until I introduce the 2 guys in the back row. David Marskel. David, tell us briefly about your bio, because you're a surprise to me today.
I'm the guy who didn't get in. So it was March 4th. the secret had gotten out. We were aware of it, and I had my Volkswagen Beetle and my girlfriend Annabelle at the time, and we came and lined up down in front of the legendary, well, it probably became the legendary that night, El Mocambo, and we waited, but didn't get in. But along the way, I've seen the Stones almost 25 times, and I was fortunate enough to work with Michael. We had the Canadian rights to the Rolling Stones Unzipped, the exhibition, which we hosted in Kitchener, and we were about to present it in Winnipeg. Got to know Ronnie Wood a little bit, and some fun stories that might come out as we go along today.
And Mick himself spoke highly of your exhibit and what he knew of it. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
As the one guy who wasn't here. Well, actually, the two guys who weren't here then. This face we know from television. This face we know is the man without whom we wouldn't be here today, and there's a good chance this building wouldn't be here. It certainly wouldn't be here in the way that it appears right now. Michael Weckerly, everyone. Woo. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's get into it. I think the logical place to start is with any of you, but here I'll pose the question and you guys can just jump in and take over. Blue as the booker, Rob is a music freak who was here and became a musicologist. Duff is the radio person who was instrumental in getting this contest going to get Rolling Stones fans into the building without actually saying there's a Rolling Stones concert, or two actually. Duff, your memories of how that went, please.
I was, hi everybody. It's been a while. Yeah, it's great. I was just talking to Bob about the sort of curse and blessing of being involved intimately in putting together the logistics and some of the nuts and bolts. I really didn't sit back and enjoy either concert either night. I was so busy setting up an early morning dinner at Barbarians between Friday and Saturday. Oh yeah, and getting Judy Welch and her modeling agency to make sure that there was lots of charm and eye candy back in those days when things weren't totally politically correct, right? So for me, it was just keeping my fingers crossed and hoping nothing would blow up on us. And so, Jeff, as it proceeded closer and closer to sort of launch time, I was waiting for some fatal flaw, something we'd missed, because it was just too big and too important to not have some glitch, some issue. And you know, I look back on it now and I think this would not be possible in the cell phone age. There'd be no way that the secret could have been kept. You know, all of those things that might have happened. I'm knowing that on the bus, when people heard about where they were really going, is they were trying to pull the windows up and tell everybody, shout it out, right? And they could not. And by the time we got to the Friday night concert, we had everybody bought in on how important it was to keep the secret. I know it got out, and we know that by Saturday, you couldn't get anywhere on Spadina. It was totally locked down. Rob can tell you about that. He was trying to get in. But the Stones, I think, in my heart of hearts, I think they are the ones that ratted themselves out because they couldn't believe that a band of their stature could be kept secret like this. Like something had to be wrong. Like maybe the radio station is the wrong station. Why isn't there anybody out there on that Friday night? So those are some of my reflections, Jeff.
Were you playing lots of Rolling Stones on the radio? Were people excited once they figured out what the heck was going on? Because CHUM was a part of this life-changing situation for Stones fans.
Well, things didn't get rolling until after the cover was blown, really. Yeah. We were all we'd all bought in on the secret. Blue will tell you, we were so proud of ourselves, essentially being able to pull this off. The cooperation of April Wine to be the front people for all of this. And really, just some little vignettes, but it's kind of humbling to see a world-class act like the Stones fishing those Polaroids out of those letters that answered the question, what would I do to party with the Rolling Stones? Oh yes. So boys will be boys is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Blue, tell us a bit about your recollection of it.
My participation in this began months before anybody thought of doing it. I'd been booking the El Mocambo, and as Miles had brought up, I also always dealt with Donald K. Donald. In fact, I don't know if you remember, but he used to do coast-to-coast tours with like Lighthouse and April Wine, and I was the bank, right? So Donald and I had been working together forever. There are there are actually three people that aren't here today that I want to make sure to mention. Two of them are no longer with us, and they were both instrumental in making this happen. The first one is a gentleman named Skip Snare. Skip Snare was Donald K. Donald's go-to guy. I'm sure when they needed equipment and the truck blew up, Donald called Skippy and said, "Fix it." And Skippy fixed it. Because if there was ever anything that any band or any show ever needed, Skippy could get it, right? And it was Skippy who called me to say, you have to hold the week of March 2nd or whatever it was, right? Because we're going to use the whole week. And I had to keep it secret. I was the first one that kept it secret, right? What happened was, when I was booking the El Mocambo, I met a gentleman named Peter Rudge, who's also not here today. He managed the Rolling Stones. He also managed a band called the Dingoes. The Dingoes played downstairs here September 6 to 11, 1976. And that's when Peter Rudge met the El Mocambo. I'd had other bands of his here. 38 Special was here. And there was a time where they said, Skippy called me and said, this was before you met them, they're going to come to town and they're going to look at two clubs. This club, and I don't know if you remember it, the other one, famous blues club, the Colonial Tavern. So they came and they toured. You met them on that tour, right? And they picked the El Mocambo, at which point, it's probably late 76 or early 77, and everything is set up right then. I'm working in an office on Bathurst Street, which is above where Bateman's Bicycles is now, if you know that place. And I received the confirmation for this show on a telex machine. Does anybody know what a telex machine is? Can anybody else operate a telex machine? Thank you. Very good for you, right?
There's no market for them, by the way. You can't resell these anymore. They're gone.
Nobody goes on social media on a telex machine. I can assure you of that. So that was how it was set up. Now, my life has always been such, since I did my first show at the Rock Pile with Country Joe and the Fish, that there's just a roll of shows. Like, I don't know what I've got tonight, but I've got shows tonight, too. And they just keep rolling and rolling and rolling. So it was all set up for me, right? And so by the time it came to actually doing the show, my job was done. I just had to go down to the hotel, say hi to Peter, get my passes, and show up, right? The only other person I want to make sure I mention here is the gentleman who sat right there 1,000 nights doing the sound, and he's not with us anymore. His name is Mike Elder. And Mike Elder was the production guy in this club, and we always talked about the Rolling Stones, and we said that we'd made each other famous because of that night. So that's how I got involved, and that's how I rolled with it.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll come back to David Bluestein, and we'll come back to Duff. Now, you each have your unique memories and views and roles in those Stones kicks. Rob, tell me where you start with this.
Well, I'd been a Rolling Stones freak since I was 8 years old, literally. Started writing for magazines when I was 15, interviewed tons of people, and of course always wanted to get to the Rolling Stones. Funnily enough, I was working for Michael Cole's magazine at the time, Stage Life, and I could kill Michael because he didn't break the secret to me. I wanted to kill him later. He asked me to write a cover story about it afterwards, which I did, charged him double. My story about this is we all knew the Stones were in town. This was no secret. They'd been seen at restaurants. Paul Wasserman, their publicist, had leaked to Peter Goddard, who was writing at the Toronto Star, a totally bullshit story, which was the cover for them being in town, that they were going to record their next album here, and they were scouting studios. So that explained why they're here. No rumors about a gig or anything like that. I remember the CHUM AM party to go see April Wine playing here, or contest, and there was a CHUM FM contest to go to a party with the Rolling Stones. And I thought, I'm not going to enter that. It's going to be stupid. I mean, it's going to be pretty girls are going to get picked, and what am I going to say, you know? I've been a maniac since I was 8. There's a lot of maniacs since I was 8. So I did not enter it until I got nervous a few days before and entered it, but I didn't win. But Monday morning, I'm in university, 3rd year. I go down to breakfast in my residence, and I'm sitting there with this girl, and she goes, oh, you're going to go see the Rolling Stones this weekend? I'm going, what the? And I'm like, I'm shaking thinking about this. And I said, they're not playing. She goes, yeah, they're playing the Alamo. And her boyfriend worked for CPI. And she knew I was in the business. I'd been writing for magazines. She just assumed I'd know. And I'm freaked. I go upstairs and I immediately call the Alamo, find out it's closed for the week for private April wine recording sessions. I phone my contact at the magazine who says, I can't talk about it. At that point, I knew this was happening. Within half a day, I knew where they were rehearsing. I threatened to go there till my contact at CPI said, if you do that, you'll blow the whole show and you'll be fired. Because I kept saying, you got to get me in here somehow. I took a week off university. Went down to the Harbor Castle Hotel, found out what floor they were on. Security wasn't nearly as good as it became later. All you had to do was go a floor up and walk down the stairs. Couldn't get off the elevator, but you knocked on every door till Anita Pallenberg, Keith's girlfriend, opened up. She had already was in trouble. She had been busted on February 24th, of course, and then Keith got busted because of her February 27th. So she just was like this, I can't do anything for you. I'm already in so much trouble, blah, 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 blah. I just kept working the hotel. I put up posters all over York University, desperate for April wine tickets because I knew that was the cover. I got a call from a friend. His girlfriend had won April wine tickets for Thursday night. Did I want them? And I tell you, this was a moment of ethical issues for me because I thought the Stones might be playing Thursday. I needed those tickets and I couldn't tell them what was really happening. I did take the tickets and I'm still feeling a little ashamed. Went to CHUM. I had to be the first person there because I wanted to be the first person on the bus that was going to get here, so I was the first person in the club, so I was going to be right there. I did that. Saw April wine. No offense to Miles. They're really good, but it wasn't what I came for. Finally, the next morning, because I knew this was it, and I knew it was Friday, my contacts had confirmed that. They'd said originally they thought Thursday, so I thought I'd really lucked out. Friday morning, I come down here around 9 in the morning, maybe even a little bit early. And it's drizzling rain all day. It's a really shitty day to be standing outside. And I'm with my girlfriend, and I come down, stand at the door. This plainclothes cop comes along and says, you got to move. I'm saying, no, I'm not doing anything. Throws me up against the wall, does a real intimidation thing, frisks me up and down. And I said, you can do that again if you want, but I don't have to move. You know what's happening. I know what's happening. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm just hoping one person doesn't show up with a pass, really two, so my girlfriend could come in too, and then I'll get in. And he goes, you're not going to get in. I said, okay, but let me just stand here just in case. Stood there all day long. Eventually the cops, taking pity on us, were shivering. We don't go to the washroom. We don't get anything to drink. We don't get food. He keeps telling us, go down to the subway. It wasn't Subway, Mr. Submarine down the street. I said, I'm not leaving here. I'm not leaving. Finally, probably around 6:30, 7 o'clock, he waves me over. And by then, there were a few people in line, only about 5, who had found out. Maybe you were one of them. I don't know. And he pulls me over, and he goes, it's going to work out. And I literally said to him, I can swear here, right?
Mildly.
I said, well, don't F with me. Do not mess with me on this. And because you don't have no understand. I was a maniac for a week. This was
The same cop that had thrown you against the wall and frisked you is now your buddy.
He had become friends. He'd found out I was a music student, becoming a musicologist. I told him tons of stories, camping out for days and days at the gardens to get tickets in 72, camping out again in 75, driving to other cities, even though I didn't have a license, but with other people to see shows. Anyway, he finally decided to help me. He had talked to some of the Stones people, and they're going to let me in. So he goes, now, why don't you go get something to eat? And I'm going, I'm not leaving. And he pulls out money. He gives my girlfriend, I don't know what then, maybe $20, maybe it's 10 even back then, I don't know what, and says, go get coffees and something to eat for both of you. So she goes down the street. And Reggie was a real famous bouncer here. Anybody who's at the Mocambo, everybody remembers Reggie. Reggie opens the door. My girlfriend's gone. She's down the street, right? Reggie opens the door and goes, now. And I'm going, I look at the cop, and I'm going, but I got to wait for Lynn. And Reggie goes, it's now or never. He's fucking with me. And I'm like, oh, this can't be. And he laughs and goes, okay, we'll wait for your girlfriend. So she comes back. We go in. We see 2 empty seats, dead center right there. I can't believe it. Why are those seats empty? I go to them, sit in them. 2 big guys come up and flash badges at me, RCMP, and go, these are reserved. I'm saying, for whom? thanks, Margaret Trudeau. Anyway, I ended up worming my way. This stage used to be about this far off the ground. I mean, literally, I was at the foot of the stage. My knees were touching Jagger's mic stand. I mean, all the photos from the first night, or not all, but a lot that are shot. The long guy with dark hair, long hair, I mean, not a long guy. Long hair down there. I'm at the foot of the stage, and this is beyond. I've seen them in 7 club shows since then. I've worked for them. I've toured with them. I've been backstage the last many tours. You know, we have a friendship of sorts. But I never thought, ever, I'd be that close. I'd be in a club, and they would play material. This was even the best. Route 66, Around and Around, Manish Boy, Little Red Rooster. These were things, I'd seen them many times, but never saw that early stuff. This was a night beyond belief.
When that stuff comes on the radio, especially Route 66, to me, that's the most, I just get a chill, and it's the stuff you don't hear often enough, and it sounds so good, and it sounds so good on the live record, all these years not being able to hear it. So when I got the link the other day to prepare for this, I'm like, cranked up my little studio monitors at home in the attic.
And they opened with that the first night.
Right, and I marveled at how good it sounds. I mean, yes, you had professional recording gear, you had Eddie Kramer. It just sounds so perfect all these years later. It stands the test of time. I want to read the Stones' message from the band that management sent over to us. And then I want you guys to think about, while I'm doing that, I think it applies to concerts a little bit as much as it applies to all the relationships and all the people we meet in our lives. Because time passes and you don't remember all the details. You don't even remember all the set lists. Well, you would, because you write liner notes. But you forget things, right? What you never forget is how something made you feel. So think about the feeling you might have had first night, second night, watching the band, going home. Think about that for a second. Feelings. Oh, we have feelings. We have a message here from the band. It says, "Hi everyone, we're sorry we can't join the event at the El Mocambo this afternoon, as we are now deep into rehearsal for our upcoming tour that we're very excited about. We just wanted to say," doesn't this sound like exactly what Mick would say in his video messages? "We just wanted to say thank you to everyone there in Toronto and our fans from around the world for being tuned in the live stream, for being part of this event, and hope you enjoy the event, and really hope you enjoy the album, the 4-record set live at the El Mocambo, 1977. So gentlemen, how did it feel to see not only the Rolling Stones, but if you're not aware, Billy Preston on keyboards had played with the Stones and had played with the Beatles, obviously, too. Take us back to the feelings you had. Duff.
Well, you go.
I'll take it. You know, even just listening to it today before we came up on stage, they were playing the album, and I got chills down my back. Now, they put out 4 songs from this on their Love You Live record, which were quite amazing and stood out from the rest of the album. In fact, it seemed to be a foolish move.
But you know what was, you know, there were some overdubs on that, as I understand.
Yeah, there were.
This is
the real thing.
Go ahead.
It sounds exactly as I remember it. And it's amazing to hear them as a 5-piece band, yes, with Billy Preston, who they toured with in 75 and 76, and Ollie Brown on percussion. But it's not the expanded thing we have now with the background vocalists and the horns, which I still love. I'll see them in Europe this summer. I mean, I went down to Detroit last fall. They don't tour without me being there. It's just not a reasonable thing to even consider.
Like, where is he? He's not here. We can't go.
No, it's more like me. I can't even think of the possibility. But when I got the link to hear it this week and finally could hear a full show, literally the hair stood up on the back of my neck. The feeling of being there, I don't have words for it. I was out of my head. Of course, it's an album title of theirs, but that's not deliberate. The emotions were insane. Afterwards, they talked to us. Bill Wyman talked to me for about a minute. Charlie Watts came up to me and shook my hand. He could see me. I was at the foot of the stage. Gave me his 2 drumsticks. And then some behemoth tackled me from behind, fighting me for the goddamn drumsticks. And this guy's about 6'4", so I was at a disadvantage. But my emotions and wanting those drumsticks so badly put me at a certain advantage. I managed to hang on to one. I still have that drumstick. I told Charlie that story when I was working for them professionally decades later. He was laughing his head off. It was so funny. But I've seen them in 7 club shows since then. I've been on the stage with them. I've been behind Keith Amp and watching them. I mean, I've had real good access. Nothing compares to that night. Because the idea of a club show with the Rolling Stones, they hadn't played one since early '64. I checked that this morning, by the way. That's deadly accurate. January '64 was the last club show. I never dreamed I'd see it, and never dreamed I'd see that early stuff. And they sounded, although Keith looked like he was half dead, he was not in good shape. But they sounded great. Despite the way he looked, he played like a demon. And you can hear it.
Well, the proof is on the record. They hadn't played, previous to those shows in March of '77 at the Elmo, they hadn't played live in 7 months since Nebworth, as I understand it. And they were dealing with the heroin busts, and they were dealing with images from the infamous 1972 film Seasucker Blues. And halfway through rehearsals in Toronto, Mick had to rush to New York, where Jade, his daughter, had an appendicitis. Keith, to your point, but when they got on stage, as professionals do, they sounded like $1 million. Duff, Blue,
Sure.
the feelings you had that weekend.
I'm ridiculously selfish. I'd started.
Well, you jumped in front of Duff, I know.
did.
That's all right.
That's because I'm ridiculously selfish. I started a company to be a booking agency that wanted to do a higher level of booking, right? And I'd come from working for Michael Cole to now I'm a booking agent, right? And I opened the business on March the 6th, 1976. So my first anniversary was the next day. So we thought we'd done pretty good for the first year. Because I don't know if you remember, there was a club called The Bottom Line in New York, right? And that was the showcase club for record companies, right? And I wanted to make the El Mocambo the bottom line for Toronto. And nothing helped. We had a good start, but nothing helped more than that gig, right? So from that point forward, right, like I saw that gig, right, as the initial platform from which I launched the rest of the next 45 years of my life, right? So that's how I remember it. I do remember, see that ceiling there that you can kind of see where the ceiling is? Yeah, that's where the ceiling is. And this stage is like about this high. So when he talks about jumping and touching, yeah, I remember how small it was. Like I walked in here and I said, boy, that's a much higher ceiling than it was before, right? Right? And it was just so small, like you were sitting, it wasn't like this at all. You were sitting in a little club watching a Roadhouse blues band do their thing. And it was fabulous, right? That's what I remember.
There was a few months ago, Weck was kind enough to invite a few of us to sit right down here. It's so intimate, right? And the sound is so phenomenal. And Alan Cross, another musicologist who's in the room, I think, joined me, and we saw this unknown band, and we're enjoying it, and it was a really young audience, younger than us. And suddenly these two people come on the stage, and they were the principal, the boyfriend, girlfriend from Walk Off the Earth, who were a pretty big band, right? And they joined in, and no one seemed to know who they were. It was really fun to see somebody that big on this stage with a band that nobody knew, and Alan and I were like, oh my God, this is a moment. Those moments you don't forget readily. Duff, what was it about that weekend here at the Elmo with the Stones and being part of CHUM Radio and the contest really instrumental in making it happen? How did it feel? What do you remember?
Well, I've sort of been, as you asked the question, people are quick off the mark to jump in. I was sort of being a little more reflective internally. And I was thinking about some vignettes that I might share here that you might find interesting that aren't seen in newspaper articles and everything you can find on the internet. Like, for instance, the whole atmosphere of what was going on inside this very premise right here was the lull after April wine and people having this tremendous energy and this buzz about what was about to happen. And while the stage was darkened right here on this very spot, this shape comes out of the wings, and it's Charlie Watts to fiddle with his drum kit. And everybody just stopped, just watched this. You know, this ghost came out, played with his kick drum, and then went back in again. Other vignettes. In the security meeting before this all came together, we were talking about what we had to be careful about, how important it was not to have some kind of incident with the public. And out of nowhere, well, first of all, let me give you the lineup. There's the local police, there is the OPP, and there are two guys with big shoes and tweed jackets. And I didn't know who they were. But as the discussion goes on, I hear somebody say, and the rifleman could be placed on the roof, and I can't remember what's across from here, for the obvious security purpose. And my mind is immediately going, what is going on here? What the hell is this? So I stopped the conversation. I said, excuse me, I represent CHUM FM, CHUM AM. Are you going to shoot rock and roll Rolling Stones fans? What are you talking about? So they looked at each other. Should we tell them? And I said, well, you'd better tell me or the whole thing is off. This is ridiculous. They said, well, we've been advised that the wife of you-know-who has decided to attend the Rolling Stones at the El Mocambo. So that was my first inkling that Maggie Trudeau was going to come down from Ottawa. More Maggie Trudeau. Every time she walked by Mick Jagger or any of the other Stones downstairs in the big dressing room, there was a lot of eye rolling. Why is that? There was no party atmosphere. There was no sweet smell of Yorkville in the air. Nothing like that, because it was loaded with the 2 plainclothes cops and total security. And everyone was on their sort of best behavior because we had the wife of the Prime Minister there. So it revolved around Maggie. She was having the best time of her life, while everyone else was sort of being a little bit too correct, a little bit too polite. I've got another thing, too. And I've shared this with Mike Weckerly, who has found a good home for this. He is probably the paramount memorabilia and poster collector. And there's a story there. That poster that you should know was a handmade thank you from the Rolling Stones with all of their autographs on it. It's handmade. They literally pasted that together under the guidance of Peter Rudge. You will see down in the left-hand corner, you'll see my name, but also a shout-out to Bob Wood, who is a colleague and who is one of the best-known top 40 program directors in the world. Literally the heartbeat of what 1050 CHUM in its glory days was all about. So that turned up as a thank you, and to get that as probably my outstanding memory is just that they would remember to do something personal like that. And here it sits. So if you've got little copies of it, now you know the backstory. This is the real original that's up there on the stage, and those printouts are some great keepsakes for you to take back.
Everyone in the room gets a replica poster. Thanks, Duff.
If you,
Well done, Duff.
Do you know what that's about, guys? I can tell you in a second. Think about it for a second. Go ahead, Blue.
David Crichton drew a picture of the El Mocambo on the old marquee. And every time somebody played here, they would take a print and they would write in the band's name and they would give it to the band as a gift. If anybody has one, I have one, or can find one, if you look in the window of the club, in the illustration that David Crichton did, it's that poster.
So now you have a backstory for the thing you can take home and maybe put in a frame and put on your wall.
Excuse me, could I
David,
just
tell me,
Duff. I'm just listening to something I haven't heard before. Are you saying that someone copied the poster?
No. He's
That could be income, man.
Oh,
he drew a graphic picture of the club.
Oh,
and
okay.
In the window, in this illustration, is that poster.
David,
I guess you could go after him if you really
you know about this T-shirt, correct? Tell us a bit about it and why the tongue is in black, which is unusual.
Yeah, when we hosted Unzip the exhibition, we also partnered with Ronnie Wood, and he's quite a prolific artist. And so we had an art show in conjunction with Unzipped. And so we got to know Ronnie and his manager and Joyce, the band manager, fairly well. And Michael and I were invited with some others to be in the Rolling Stones bubble. This was during COVID last November, to see them in November. And we got a chance to meet Ronnie Wood and hang out, and that was a pretty cool deal. But on that tour, and you probably saw it in Detroit, Bob, the Black Tongue was sort of the beginning of that tour, because Charlie had passed in August, I think it was. And so when I got there and I got to meet Ronnie, and I realized this T-shirt was going to be pretty iconic, I asked Ronnie if there was a chance if he could get one for me signed by the rest of the band. So they've all signed it. I think Ronnie says great exhibitionist or something about our exhibition, but it's kind of cool that they've surrounded the Black Tongue representing Charlie, which was pretty cool. And Michael was there. We had so much fun with Ronnie and Sally Wood.
They were incredible people. I almost say that, you know, until you meet them, you really don't know the in-depth appreciation of what their music is, and they're beautiful people.
Yeah, and just very quickly, the security was sort of keeping an eye. I was keeping an eye on the security, saying, "Are we done?" And he said, "No, keep going." At the end, what was supposed to be 10 or 15 minutes turned out to be like an hour.
Even got a coffee out of the deal.
And he said it's because you didn't ask him what's Mick really like, or what do you miss Charlie? You asked him about his artwork, so he kept going and going and going. Really prolific. If you look up his artwork, he's really cool.
You'll love this, and Rob, more than anyone, has hung out with the Rolling Stones to get interviews done to write about them, and the story that maybe you can tell us in a second here about meeting Mick and how you warmed him up. I know meeting Bill and meeting Mick and meeting Keith and meeting Ronnie. Ronnie in particular stands out. In a hotel room in New York City. I got there, we were supposed to talk at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, this is some years ago. We were talking about his art, but we were also talking about music. And his publicist called me and said, "Jeff, I've got good news and bad news." I said, "I'll start with the bad news." She said, "He's not ready, but he will be ready. And you got stood up by somebody kind of important." And I said, "Tell me more." Obama and Clinton invited him to a lunch, so he's going to do that and then, or a dinner. He's going to do that and then he'll come and meet with you. And he was sweet. It was like brothers in a hotel bed, as the song goes. It was like talking to your friend. He was the sweetest, kindest, and so was Mick. And so was Keith. Keith had no concept of time. He just sat, and he had a handheld mic, and a drink, and a smoke, all kind of going at once. And he's like, honey, can you get me another drink? And he just talked like your buddy about music. It's all about the music. With Mick, it was a bit more about everything else, but he was fun and charming and good to be around. So tell us about you meeting Mick this particular time, because I just love the story.
The Stones in 2002 decided to do an autobiography. It's called According to the Rolling Stones. The byline is Jagger, Richards, Watts, and Wood. But the way they were going to do it is they needed somebody to interview them about their art, not about sex and drugs. They wanted to talk about their music making. And Charlie told me, we had our office do a list, and he goes, and there was 10 names, and they were all shit, except for one who was dead. And that was Robert Palmer of the New York Times, who was a great writer and had passed away. So Charlie said, at this point, we realized we needed to figure this out ourselves. Keith was reading my book on Stax Records. Keith, for those who don't know, is a maniac when it comes to reading. Non-fiction only. When they're in non-English speaking countries, his gophers have told me one of the hardest things is to keep him in books. So World War II buff, reads absolutely everything. Reads a lot of music books. He puts sticky notes on pages. He reads like a graduate student at a university. I've seen his copy of my book with tons of sticky notes in it. And when Keith is reading this at rehearsals, and goes, this guy I think would be good. And I know that because I had somebody else who was at the rehearsals who knew me, long story. He knew them from the Crawdaddy Club days and was still friends with them, but he had met me decades later and we'd done some albums together. He had done album covers for which I had written liner notes. So he's telling me, Keith is reading your book at rehearsals. He's going to, anyway, blah, blah, blah.
Keith was easy and Ronnie's easy, but now it's you and Mick.
Yeah, they're a corporation. They vote on things. So to do this book, 3 of them voted yes. 1 voted no. Mick voted no. He did not want to do a book. He had actually given $1 million back to a publisher for his autobiography because he tried writing it and hated the idea. He doesn't like going in depth and doesn't like looking too far in the past. So it's one of the few times Mick had to do something he did not want to do. All the band members warned me. In fact, their office warned me, Mick is going to be difficult. And Keith would go, have you talked to Mick yet? Ron would be going, Mick, have you done Mick yet? And they want to know how many hours Mick did because they had all agreed they'd do so many hours. They want to make sure Mick wasn't cheating. Anyway, so Mick was the last person the first round. I did several rounds with him. And I'm told to, Miranda House, who's a sort of gopher for him, meets me at my room. With Ronnie, it was like, oh, just come to my room at this time. And I come to his room, his wife answers. Ronnie, greets me, and we do it. Charlie, same thing. Keith, a little more. You get it to office floor, security there. They go down, the door opens this much. They come back and say, you need to wait a few minutes. They go down, open the door this much, a few more minutes, fine, you get in. With Mick, Miranda goes to the room, doesn't knock, just slides a card. Of course, the door opens. And they all have suites, right? And there's suites upon suites. The best suite is always Mick's. Keith is the second best suite. There is a hierarchy. Now, I'd been in all the suites but Mick's. Mick's has this long hallway. And Miranda opens the door, and she looks at me, and she goes, go on. It's like you're seeing the Queen or something. I'm looking at her like, go on? Anyway, she goes, Rob Bowman is now entering. And I'm looking at her, she goes, and so I go down the hallway and turn, there's Mick sitting, eating dinner with his daughter, Elizabeth.
Did you have to curtsy?
I didn't have the curtsy. Mick was extremely friendly, excuses his daughter, goes off somewhere, and then he goes, look, I didn't want to do this. I don't remember anything. And he's got his arms crossed like this, and his legs wrapped around the other leg. And he goes, so I don't know what we're going to do. And I'm then going, this is going to be fun. Anyway, I charmed him.
You turned it around and tell us how. It was beautiful.
If you're going to be a good interviewer at that level, you got to know how to play with this. So I said to him, I saw you the other week with Solomon Burke. Solomon Burke is one of his heroes. I knew that. Solomon Burke became one of my heroes because of Mick. Solomon and I had been friends for years. He's a great soul singer, for those who don't know. The Stones covered his song, Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, and I'd flown out to LA to see Solomon open for them at a small theater called the Wiltern. I went to that gig specifically because I was hoping Solomon would duet with him, which he did, and Everybody Needs Somebody to Love. And Solomon was like 350, 400 pounds, had this massive cape. At the end of his thing, he put it around Mick and said, you're now the king of rock and soul. And it's sort of funny. Solomon goes off the stage, and Mick's holding this cape out that's wide enough for 5 people and puts Ronnie and Keith. And Mick, they all just wrap themselves in the cape. So I tell Mick I was there, and he goes, oh, you came out for that? I said, how was I not? Solomon's playing. He's a friend of mine. And I was hoping you guys would do Everybody Needs Somebody to Love. And then I start telling him Solomon stories. And suddenly, I was no longer the guy that was going to interview Mick, that he didn't want to do the interview, but had to because the other 3 band members had forced him to. We were 2 record geeks telling him about Solomon Burke, and I know stuff that he didn't know. So I'm sharing stories with him about Solomon various times we've been together, and Mick is like wide-eyed. It's literally 2 record geeks. It's great. And then I pivot, and I start talking about some new moves that he'd brought into that tour because I'd studied film from '64 up to 2002 and charted out every dance move he used, when they'd come in, when they'd go out. I prepared for these things. I prepared for months for this. I knew what I was doing. And so we start talking about these dance moves. And he starts talking about how, we got that idea and where it came from. And he goes, no one has ever asked me anything like this before. And I felt like saying, well, duh, you did hire me, but of course, I wasn't going to do that. I said, well, it's part of your art. That's what you wanted, right? It's music, but in your case, it's also movement. So then it became easy. We pivoted back to '62 London Blues Clubs, and Mick and I were suddenly, I'll put in quotes, best friends. He was great. And he went deep, went places he'd never been before. We argued with each other. I asked about the gospel influence on Exile. This is maybe the 3rd interview. Because Mick never likes Exile being considered their best record because it's Keith's record more than Mick, and it pisses him off to no end. The rivalry between the 2 is really quite interesting.
And yet, now maybe notwithstanding this Live at the Elmo record, and I'm not saying that because we're at the Elmo, I'm saying it because it's a really great live record. Exile is the Stones' consummate album, and Mick has never agreed with that. It was Marianne, I first heard about it in the late 70s, listening to the radio. It was probably CHUM, might have been Q107, where Marianne said, this is the closest to Mick's genius that will ever be. Exile on Main Street came out 50 years ago, right about now.
This week, yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm asking about the gospel influence in Exile, and he goes, we've always been gospel influenced. And I'm going, no, Let It Loose, Soul Survivor, Just Want to See His Face. They're really different than anything you've done before. And he goes, no, there's gospel tracks on lots of our records. And I said, name one from Goat's Head Soup. He looks at me. I go, name one from It's Only Rock and Roll. Name one from Black and Blue. Mick, they're not there. Something happened. And there's not one on Sticky Fingers either, the album before Exile. What changed to take you in that gospel direction on those songs? He sat back and he said, you're right. And then started telling me about on the '69 tour, they'd met Chris Stratchwitz, who owned our Hooley Records, and had put out a ton of gospel records. And Chris had given them everything. And they'd taken it back, and that had opened the doors in Mick's musical life.
Without him even knowing it, which is often the case.
Well, and he just didn't want to think that deeply. But I sort of forced him to, and it was kind of funny arguing with Mick.
Where can we read more about this conversation you had with him? Where can we find more of this information?
Oh, it's the book's out. It's been out for years. It's called
Yeah.
According to the Rolling Stones and blah 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 blah.
Thank you, people in the room.
Can we straighten out the Cockroaches story at some point?
In a second, we should straighten out the Cockroaches story. I'd like to know from our esteemed Universal Music associate, Mark, do we have anything from the studio audience or from the live stream in terms of questions for the panel?
Yes.
Or stories they have about being here, perhaps?
We do. I want to give a special shout out to Daz Ruiz on the live stream, who was here the second night, March 5th. They won the CHUM FM contest, and they took away the camera at the back door after they got off the concert winners bus, but they managed to sneak it in later, and they have some great photos of Charlie's drum kit, apparently. So I said, thanks so much, and it was an incredible night, and it's a memory that they still hold. And then to Rob's point, actually, we have a question from the Terry 1965. Not sure where he's coming in from, but he wants to know who came up with the idea of the name the Cockroaches. Was it, was there a concept there, or was it,
Rob, so where did the name Cockroaches come from? And shine some light, if you would, pardon the pun. Actually, I enjoyed that pun. About the whole Cockroaches thing.
Well, it's kind of always bothered me. There's a shot of the marquee from the Saturday night where it says Cockroaches. Now remember, after Friday night, the whole world knew about this. So they knew the Stones were playing. But for years and years, people have written about it. It's in Toronto Life this week. Somebody was talking about it on breakfast television. I've seen other people in lectures, and they'll go, and they played under the name the Cockroaches, and nobody knew it. It was never a secret pseudonym. It was never hidden that way.
Tell us from the beginning, how did this thing go down? Where did the name come from, and how did it proliferate?
They always used different names for backstage passes and stuff, and it was, as I understood from Blue, which I just found out the other week when we did our Zoom call, and I didn't realize this, it had been used on the laminates. So if you had access to the Stones area, which I believe was on the first floor here, right? That was their green room. You had a Cockroaches laminate.
They didn't have laminates.
What
It
did they
was
do, just passes?
1977.
Okay,
It was
stone passes?
stick-on passes.
have a lot of
Big. It was very similar to this, but big red square, right? Because they didn't want to print something that said
Right.
Rolling Stones, because then the printer would know.
Makes sense. So the Cockroaches hit it well. And so, on the marquee that Friday night, it just said closed for April Wine recording session. It didn't say Cockroaches. Nobody thought they were going to see the Cockroaches in an opening band for an April Wine. There was no opening band all week. It was just April Wine. It was only after the first night, there's pandemonium the second night. As Duff said, Spadina was closed down. I came down trying to get in the second night, ran into the cop who'd helped me the first night. He said, I can't help you tonight. It's just insanity. But then they put the Cockroaches up. So, of course, people take photos of the marquee, and it's become this silly myth that this is how they disguise the gig. They didn't disguise the gig as the Cockroaches whatsoever. That was an in-joke only after everybody knew it.
It makes me think of the adage, the saying that we've all heard for years, and if you haven't, if you're too young, if there were a nuclear war, who would survive? Keith Richards and Cockroaches.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, that's been around for a while.
What kind of world are we leaving for Keith Richards? And we used to say Betty White, rest her soul.
Keith is astonishing. For all his drugging and drinking, his mind is sharper than maybe anybody else's in this room.
Well, to your point about reading, we were talking about the history of art from 300-400 years ago. He's the most well-read rock and roller we've ever met. Probably he and David Bowie.
Yeah, it's astonishing. I'd ask Keith about something in '66, and he'd go, well, there's this 1942 Tampa Red record. Tampa Red was a blues pianist. And I knew these records, so I knew he wasn't making this up. And he'd go, you remember this? And I told, yeah. And he goes, well, the left hand of the piano's doing this. And I took it and I adapted the bass line like that, and I didn't think Bill could play it, so I played the bass on the record. He'd know those sort of details. You'd ask Mick about something, and he'd go, was that mid-'60s? And it's something from the late '70s. For Mick, it's all just a wash. He's a great soundbite interviewer, but he doesn't really like to go deep. And he can tell you great stories, but dates, times, places, details, not there. It's a different kind of mind.
Mark, do you have any more from the audience?
Well, not me. I'm over here.
Max is over here.
He's got a nice shirt on.
Max, wander over and
Yeah.
maybe Mark can give you a
Absolutely.
microphone. I want the three panelists to think about this because everyone has their favorite everything. whether it's a band member or a record album or a song. So I'll give you 3 choices. You can pick any of those things as it relates to the Rolling Stones. After Max goes, you can give us one of those of your favorites. Everyone's got a favorite. The thing you crank most in terms of a song, the album you play most on the turntable or however you play music, or the member of the band you'd want to hang out with most. First, here's Max. Max is a heck of a fine singer.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction.
You're welcome.
And as a two-parter question, the one question is about that event that happened for those 2 nights. This may have been the biggest celebrated event of the Rolling Stones of any rock and roll band that has ever come to any country have ever come to this country in Canada in history. And although this was a story that has been talked about for those 45 years, it's become a sort of a cultural legacy. And for Duff Roman, when you first heard of the Stones' first single, "Not Fade Away," did you ever think that this band would change the circuit of music forever, next to the Beatles?
Well, I always had this sort of yin-yang with the Beatles and the Stones. It just is almost poetic justice that the Stones have still survived as a group, that what their legacy is this continuity and this realness, this extension of where R&B began, that this little English rock and roll group imitating black R&B could actually get it so right for so long. So for me, nothing surprises me about the Stones. They are a phenomenon. They are a force of nature. And their position in music is quite different than the Beatles. The Beatles created sea changes in terms of how technology was used and how artists were able to sort of get the angst and the temper of the times and really change the entire music picture. For the Stones, it was layer upon layer of something tried and true with their unique twist. And for me, they were the most successful of the English bands taking on R&B music from America. And part of that is coming from my background as a record producer as well, with the best blue-eyed soul singer I've ever heard, and that is David Clayton Thomas. And what we had to do to get it right. And as the model for a very fledgling Canadian music industry, when we had no real studios here, we did our recordings, 3 tracks in the old Hallmark studios. But Get Off of My Cloud had that sound. It was just so hot. It just banged right through that little AM speaker that you had in your Walkman, in your Sony transistors. And that sort of target in terms of we would work toward getting that sound is why I sort of have a debt or a tribute to the Rolling Stones. They got it so right. And I'm deeply indebted for just being able to have had a career that was adjacent to the Rolling Stones, and to know that I had that close contact for those 2 special days in March, and that there's now an iconic recollection that is spread worldwide, and to be at the center of it. And again, when I listen to Rob talk about the details and the scholarship that he's put into this, I'm not there. I was the guy that was the radio guy. And I was trying to put together a concert or a promotion, a contest that wouldn't fall flat on its face. I was so busy with sort of answering and putting out little fires and being worried about the mechanics of it, that for me, a lot of it wasn't any chance to sit back or be in the front row as my friend Rob here was, just digging it all. I was the worrywart, trying to make sure that this thing did not fall down in any way. And you know what? I think we did pretty good.
You did great.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Duff. Is there anything else in terms of questions from the live stream or from the room?
Yeah, I think we have a question from Joe here.
Thanks, Joe. Come.
This one is actually for my old friend Rob and you, Jeff. You both mentioned that the Stones had not played a club gig in 14 years before
I know
the
where you're going
Mocambo.
with this.
The Marquee Club.
Yeah, Marquee Club.
So the Marquee Club does exist. All right. I just needed confirmation on that.
Yeah, that was done for a TV show, and it's absolutely correct. They did play that one club in England in 1971, and God damn it, I wish I was there. But they hadn't played a gig for the public at a club since January '64.
Rob,
but good point. Good point.
Rob, maybe you remember this, but a couple of years later, in the early '80s, when we were getting together, I totally fell for a band that called themselves the Cockroaches, and they tried to play the Isabella Hotel. And I remember telling you about it, and you went, no.
I do remember that. And, you know, every tour, when there'd be rumors they're going to play the Elmo again. And, of course, Weck wasn't part of the Elmo then. It might be different next time.
I was 14, man. I wish I was. I was a big fan at that time, but I was not here.
But when these rumors, Keith told me, is to really piss him off. He goes, if some sleazy owner of this club who's trying to make a buck out of them when they're never intending to play a club show separate from their regular show here. And this went on for years. But again, Wex is completely exonerated from that. And the Cockroaches' name was a ridiculous thing for that band to do.
Let's include all 5 of you on the way we're going to wrap this thing up, if you don't mind, unless you have something else dying and burning within you to release to the room and to the live stream around the world.
Blue's got a new record we want to talk about.
Right, of course he does, yes. It's a box set. Tell me, and it goes to 11. There's a new Spinal. Let's not get into that. Favorite album, favorite song, or favorite tour, or favorite member. Each of you, you get any of those things. Share with us, would you? Share with the whole room.
Well, let me go first.
Go ahead, David.
We should end on a high. I just want to add one quick little thing. I would come to the Mocambo and get in for other shows, and a year later I did line up and get in for Elvis Costello, which was pretty cool. But as we've heard, the ceiling was low. It was a very intimate setting. And one of my memories of that was the servers couldn't get to you once the show started, so they would sell quarts of beer. And so they would talk you into buying 2 so that they didn't have to come back because they couldn't get
Same at the Gasworks. A lot
same
of
with
clubs
the
back
Gasworks
in
and
the
so
day, right?
And I don't know if Bredor, if I'm mixing that up with a trip to Quebec, or if Bredor was here, but
It's
anyway,
all hazy, isn't it?
I remember that.
Bredor was here.
Yeah. I've seen the bands a lot. I got to be a little bit close recently with them, but probably the best memory for me was, help me, Rob, 2012 when they went back to Buffalo. I think it was that year. And my daughter saw them for the first time, and she was my age. She was the age that I was when I saw them in Buffalo. And it was just such a marvelous thing to watch a young woman see the Rolling Stones. And of course, every show for about 5 or 7 years before that and since, I thought, that's the last time I'll ever get to see them. So it's wonderful that we're going to go and see them in London, England, July 3rd.
Oh my gosh, let me share this, because speaking of young women at Rolling Stones shows, so I'd just gotten married, one of my wonderful marriages, and it was in Edmonton in the early 1990s, and the Stones were playing Commonwealth, and the label was Virgin Records. And Diane Trombley, whose mother was at the Big 8, CKLW, Rosalie's daughter, got me tickets. She said, I got you a pair of tickets for a wedding present. I said, thank you so much. She goes, they're pretty good seats. So we go and we walk, and we're walking, and it didn't say row 1 or row A for whatever reason, the way they'd configured it, but we just keep getting pushed and pushed and pushed to the front by the ushers. And we end up front row, just right of center, stage left, in front of Keith. And so, holy shit, right? We're seeing the Stones in the front row at Commonwealth Stadium in Edmonton. This is the most wonderful thing on earth, and my new wife hadn't seen them ever. So she's so excited, and she's so demonstrative and so animated that Keith, at one point, in the middle of playing guitar, stops playing guitar. The band rolls on, and he comes over and he reaches down and he puts both of her hands in both of his hands and squeezes them. And he says, honey, thank you. And, you know, she didn't wash again. Wow. Go ahead. Sorry, I had to throw that in because what a moment.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Weck, what have you got?
Well, you know, not too dissimilar than you. It was the Some Girls tour. And it kind of became reminiscent because one of the songs that became my favorite song was Miss You. And it was at this club that Miss You was premiered in that 1977 show. And after work, I did that. It really became more relevant. That I really felt that, wow, this is a really cool song, and it was really all the guitars going at the same time, and the bass and coming through, and then Mick standing up. It was just such a powerful song for me at the time. And I remember sitting there at Rich Stadium, and it was called The Time, and listening to that song, and then doing some work and history on it, and to have that ability to come back here and be a part of it, it really meant a lot to me.
It's a perfect song. It's a #1, and it's disco. But the Rolling Stones do disco.
That was a
better than
time,
anyone.
man.
It was a good time. What about you, Blue?
Well, I was at a lot of Rolling Stone shows in my time. I did merchandise for a tour they called, I think it was called Steel Wheels. Yes, that was '89, yes. Sold hundreds of thousands of those with a red tongue, though. And they still do. It's one of the #1 selling icons of all time, is that tongue. So I'm at Foxborough Stadium in Massachusetts. The Rolling Stones had 3 levels of catering backstage. There's the local crew and, ne'er-do-wells that are helping. They get the tent. And then there's the area for the professionals, the sound man, all the guys on the buses that are people that are doing things that are not with the band. They do a little better. They may get real food as opposed to the deli food, right? But then there's the inner sanctum. And the only time I got to go to the inner sanctum was in Foxborough, Massachusetts. That's where they have the lobster, right? And the wine bar, and it's like a fountain of champagne. And this is and all the people, only there is the band, the players, the senior management, and Michael Cole's staff. And that's it. And I'm having a wonderful time. I'm playing pinball. And I look at this guy beside me, and it's like, who's this skinny little guy beside me playing pinball? It's Mick. My Mick experience is playing Pinball Wizard with Mick.
Surreal.
For real.
Duff, how about you? An album, a song, a memory,
song.
a thing.
Well, for me, and trying to flash back through a career that has just spanned 63 years, my recall is sometimes a little fuzzy, but I will say that my favorite song is You Can't Always Get What You Want. And I just felt that as a baby boomer, that in the song, in the movie, The Big Chill, it was just the perfect statement. And it was sort of like the end of an era. It was like that generation was having to grow up, have responsibilities. You might remember that there was now respect for cops, that there were people coming to grips with how they had wasted or spent their lives. And that undercurrent, as that movie starts, and you hear you can't always get what you want, was like a hymnal for baby boomers. It was sort of like a statement. And it almost in a way was one of the first times that people were wrong about it being all over for the Stones too. As what W.C. Fields said, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. And that's certainly my sort of most passionate and personal feeling.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Duff Roman, everyone. A round of applause. Mr. Rob Bowman, everyone. David Bluestein. David Marscal. And thanks to Michael Weckerly in the El Mocambo.
Thank you, Jeff Woods.
And to Universal Music Canada, and to Miles Goodwin and April Wine. And on behalf of our panel today, on behalf of the You Discover Music Canada live streaming event, the Rolling Stones Revisited, thanks for being a part of it. I'm Jeff Woods from Records and Rock Stars. Have a great rest of the day.
Way to go, Jeff. Well done.